everybody. Welcome on into the Space Cowboy Show. I'm your host, Ricardo, and we have a whole lot to discuss. The Dallas Cowboys fall to the Detroit Lions on Thursday Night Football, 44-30, and it was a very sloppy game for the Dallas Cowboys, and their playoff chances just evaporating in front of them. We have to talk a whole lot about what happened that night. Before we do that, the show is powered by Crushman Media, so please make sure to go check out the other shows in the media network. And also please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you haven't done so already to share your thoughts on this game and how the Cowboys are looking as we're going into the final 4 games of the season. So as I mentioned, the Cowboys lose 44-30 to the Detroit Lions. They fall to 2-5 on the road, and they are now 6-1 with 4 games remaining to play. Now, albeit that the opponents they're going up against aren't the hardest, so there is still a pathway for the Cowboys to finish the season strong. I know that no one wants to hear that, but there is a pathway for that, and I think that that's going to be what we want to see moving forward. Now, again, the quality of the opponents might change our perspective on how we're looking at things, but I digress. So going into this game, the Cowboys absolutely needed to win this game. I had a feeling that with how they were playing and how they were gelling and how things were falling into place for them, that it did look like the Cowboys were capable of putting together a run to get to the playoffs and run the table. But unfortunately, I guess my faith in them was a bit too much because the Dallas Cowboys went into this game, and while they were in this game at one point, they were very sloppy in all 3 phases of football. And when it comes to the miscues on the offensive side of the ball, the number one thing that bothered me was the pass protection for Dak Prescott. Nate Thomas and Terrence Steele were horrible that night. And the other thing about it, when we talk about Nate Thomas, there was a discussion of, does this guy have a possibility of becoming a starter on your offensive line moving forward? And we literally saw him turn into the second coming of Chaz Green. When you get your quarterback sacked 5 times, pressured on 20+% of his dropbacks, you're going to have a hard time trying to win football games that way. I believe that you really needed Tyler Guyton tonight, and that's crazy to say, but there is this weird idea that Tyler Guyton is a bad football player, which is not true whatsoever. Tyler Guyton struggled in his rookie season for sure. However, he has been developing into a good, solid left tackle for you. And again, is he perfect? Absolutely not. But the fact of the matter is that when it comes to this offensive line, you needed a guy like Tyler Guyton to step up for you. And then talking about Terrence Steele, now we had to have a conversation of, do you even think about retaining him going into this upcoming season because of what you're going to need to do on the defensive side of the ball and the draft capital you're going to have to put on that side and things like that. And we'll talk about that more as we get into the offseason. Ferguson this year has been so annoying to watch, I'll just put it. Yes, he has caught a lot of passes, he's had some touchdowns, but the thing is that the fumbling issues have killed the Dallas Cowboys this season. Momentum's going to shift a lot because of what you do in that particular instance, but the fact is that Jake Ferguson has not been that guy that you've been looking for this particular season, especially the money you paid for him, because I know a lot of people like to get on Dak Prescott, especially with how much money we're paying him, but the fact is that when these other dudes are not showing up and doing their job, they need to be ridiculed as well. You know, I want these guys to be successful, but when you're putting the ball on the ground and you're not being able to be a guy that we can reliably depend on, especially with the quarterback, that's a problem. And that's where with Jake Ferguson, this needs to be solved ASAP because you have this guy on a long-term commitment, and I was okay with paying him that kind of money. But the fact is he's just not been a good target this season reliably, which is what you would want in your tight end. Now, I do want to congratulate Javonte Williams for getting over 1,000 rushing yards. He has been a godsend for the Cowboys this season. Albeit, there'll be games where he just doesn't rush the ball a whole lot. This particular game, he had 17 carries for 67 yards and he had the touchdown. He's been a fantastic part of this offense. Having a 1,000-yard rusher and being able to set up third and manageables or second and manageables because of how you're running the ball on first or even second down is huge. And I think that needs to be celebrated. But when it comes down to it, it does look like we're possibly going to be in a situation of, okay, do you bring Javonte Williams back or not? Now, a lot of people will say yes, but knowing his market, you're probably looking at around $6 to $8 million a year over 2 to 3 years. Now, I wouldn't mind doing that, but now you have to talk about extending George Pickens, which he didn't have a great game this day. But considering how things were going this game, CeeDee Lamb was cooking, Ryan Flanoy was doing his thing. Granted, that was after CeeDee Lamb got hurt, and as a result, he was out for the whole game after that point in time. But the point still stands is that you were in a position where offensively you just needed to do enough to stay in it, and you couldn't, especially with how sloppy you were, which is crazy to say that this was a 3-point game at one point. So when we think about it, the Cowboys clawing back from 27-9, and by the way, the 2 interceptions that Dak Prescott threw were not his fault. I saw so many people, especially some of these Cowboys reporters, I'll even name one, Jane Slater, for example. She put up a stat line, we're talking about his yardage, the touchdown, and then he threw the 2 interceptions. It was so disingenuous because if you actually watch the game, the first interception, it bounces off George Pickens' hands at the beginning of the third quarter, and then the last one at the end of the game, Ryan Flanoy just had it ripped from him, and they're going to credit that as an interception on Dak Prescott. So if you're going to go out there and look at the scoreboard and you're telling people, oh, we got to do the eye test this, eye test that. Well, the eye test told me that Dak Prescott didn't throw 2 interceptions because if his receivers could catch the ball, we're having a different conversation. And maybe the game goes different. Who knows? But it is what it is. Defensively, I am in the camp now that Matt Eberflus should not be coming back after this season is over. I've been thinking about how the Cowboys are going to go about it, but even with these additions, it's not helping you. And I'm not just talking about like Quinnen Williams and Logan Wilson and adding those guys during the trade deadline. I'm talking about you getting DeMarvion Overshown back, Siobhan Ravel coming in and stepping up. We'll see if Trevon Diggs plays. He probably won't. I don't know. But the fact is you were getting guys back from injury. You were getting guys onto this team that were talented enough to help you in those particular positions. And yet the result is still the same. I don't understand how Kenneth Murray is getting more snaps over Logan Wilson, a guy that you traded for. Oh, but Space, it was a 7th-round pick, you'd say. Well, the fact of the matter is that you are acquiring these players. You should be able to make this stuff work. I personally don't mind Murray on the field, but just not as your middle linebacker. I would hope that you can maybe do some other things, but no, you're not. And that's the part that is irritating, is that even with you adding all of this personnel on the defensive side of the ball, you're still not finding ways to make it work. Another thing is, what are we doing with these matchups? Marquise Bell on Jamison Williams. It's just insane to me how they just saw the matchup, the Lions that is, and they just kept going after the Cowboys. Whether it be doing Jahmyr Gibbs in the slot because you were containing him in the run game despite the 3 touchdowns. They just kept running the same plays on you over and over, and it was succeeding to amazing efficiency. And I got to tip my cap to the Lions because they came into this game understanding we need to win this game so that we can keep our playoff hopes alive, because knowing how our schedule's looking, we need to win this game. And they did exactly that. They came out with a sense of urgency, and the Cowboys, it was a very sloppy sense of urgency for them. And so I look at how the Cowboys are looking on the defensive side of the ball as well, and I don't know what it is, but every part of this defense just needs help. Now, I'm not talking about the defensive tackle room. I'm talking about the edges, your linebackers, your corners, and even your safety play. There was a moment where I believe it was Malik Hooker. There was a play where you had a chance to get an interception, but Malik Hooker just stopped running, and the ball just went out of the back of the end zone when that was a prime opportunity for you to turn the ball over if you were tracking the ball properly. And again, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I understand that. But the fact is that these are opportunities that you need to make as a defense. If you can't turn the ball over and make a takeaway and give your offense a chance, you're going to struggle. Now, if there's one coordinator that the Dallas Cowboys need to fire, it's definitely Nick Sorensen. I understand we talk about Matt Eberflus, but think about this. With how the Cowboys have operated this year on special teams, if you remove Brandon Aubrey from that group, this is arguably the worst special teams unit in the NFL. The Detroit Lions had an average starting field position at their 45-yard line. What are we doing? And then on top of that, how is it that a backup tight end catching these kickoff returns and getting more yardage than Kevontae Turpin? Now, with Kevontae Turpin, he has been irking me a whole lot this season, particularly over the past 2 games. The situations where he's acting like he didn't call for a fair catch, but he's throwing his arm up, signaling for a fair catch. Whether he's doing it unintentionally or whatever, I don't know. But the fact is that it's in a dome. This is the second week in a row this has happened. And he's just not been that guy that we want him to be. Whether it be how Nick Sorensen's drawing things up, how he's asking these guys to operate, I have no clue. But it's just been horrible. I've been a bit meh on the Nick Sorensen hire, especially going back. I was kind of like, it is what it is, but I'm just not a fan. And it's showing why. I think that the Cowboys, if they had to make a coordinator change, the number one thing they need to do is get rid of Nick Sorensen. This guy is horrible. You could talk about the execution with the guys that you have out there, but the fact is it's been a consistent problem since the season began with the special teams unit. You know, you get horrible field position because of what's going on, and on top of that, you're constantly being in situations where the opponent is able to get past your guys and down the ball at the 1-yard line on punts, or even in situations on the kickoff returns where you're just not setting up Turpin, or Turpin's not doing his job, whatever the case may be. But my whole thing is that if there's any coordinator change that needs to be made, it's definitely with special teams, for sure. Now, looking ahead, the Dallas Cowboys will be taking on the Vikings next week, and that's going to be a huge game for these Cowboys as they need to win that game and pray to God that a lot of stuff goes their way. I don't think that Dallas is going to be making the playoffs, but one of the things that I need to see moving forward is how can this team grow going into 2026. I know not a lot of Cowboys fans want to hear that, but to me, that's what I think they need to do. The Dallas Cowboys are in a position where they will most likely have a better record than what they had last year. Sure. But at the same time, it's a year where defensively you can't stop a nosebleed, and offensively you basically have to play a perfect game, and if you don't, you lose. And don't get me started on the special teams again, because that stuff is irking me. Aside from Brandon Aubrey, of course. A couple things that I'm looking for going into next year, especially with what you're doing now, is the play calling on the offensive side of the ball has been more or less fine. I've had no issues with it whatsoever. And the fact is that if we look at the stretch of games that you're 3-1 in after the bye week, you've done a great job of battling adversity. Yes, you take care of the Raiders. You come back 21 down versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And then with the Chiefs, you start off the game slow, but you manage to get back into that game and you go ahead and win it, especially with what you're doing when it comes to offensive play calling. And then in this particular game, you look at what's happened, and I think a lot of it just came down to execution. I had no problems with how the Cowboys operated on offense when it came to the play calling, but it had a lot to do with the execution with this team that really killed them in that game against the Lions. So I'm hoping that we consistently see Shoddy continue to grow and that we see him continue to develop himself, and along with Clayton Adams, them two working together, I want to see that continue to develop, and hopefully going into next year we have a little bit more chemistry, and now we're not trying to figure out what's going on, because really the biggest focal point is the defensive side of the ball. You know, what are we doing? We were doing things that were working against the other 3 opponents that we played against. And it's not like, aside from the Raiders, you were playing scrubs. You were playing the reigning defending Super Bowl champions who were 8-2 at that point. Then you were going up against a Kansas City team that was fighting for their playoff lives. And on top of that, you were in a particular situation where, you know, there were moments where your defense was actually getting stops. So what changed? I have no clue. Whether you want to tip the cap to Detroit or you want to fully blame Matt Eberflus is up to you. To me, it's a bit of both. But again, I really do believe that this Cowboys team defensively has a whole lot of soul searching to do in the offseason. And whether it be a new DC or you just have to use those 2 first-round picks you accumulated for this particular year, especially after that Micah Parsons trade on the defensive side of the ball, you have a lot of work to do there. And that's pretty much it, guys. My eyes are solely set on 2026, and I hate to say that, but again, even if this team made it as a wild card, you're not going to do anything. They're 2-5 on the road. It's like a night and day difference with this squad. And again, you're going through the motions of this first-time head coach in his first year, and you got to hope that in the offseason you can do enough defensively to where you can become respectable. Again, on the offensive side of the ball, the Cowboys are set. You just re-sign George Pickens, figure out what you're going to do at running back, and you just cook from there and hope everyone stays healthy. Defensively, you have a lot of work to do. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the Space Cowboy Show all the way to the end. I hope to see you guys in the next one when we go to take on the Vikings. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.